Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of TF. Nova is still being re-educated in Andy Burnham's small plates rehabilitation camp. They do things a little differently there. We recommend, of the brainwashing hypnosis programs, we recommend 3 small ones and then 1 large hypnosis program if you think you're really deviant from Northern thought. So it's once again, it's me, Hussein, and Maddie. How is everybody?
You just found another trans woman to do it. Well, I keep making the joke that it's like, oh, you just found the other tranny, you know. But the real reason why I'm filling in for Nova is that I dropped the dime on her, so I can take her place.
You know what it is? It's like in Afghanistan, where if you wanted your neighbor's poppy field, you just be like, oh, that guy's Taliban as hell. I see him doing Taliban shit all the time. And the U.S. Army's just like, yep, all right, good enough for us.
That to Andy Burnham. Burnham. That's his name.
Well, as of today, we are entering day 1 of Britain doing things a little differently. The Manchester, we all live in Manchester now. Greatest Manchester, in fact.
Manchester by the we, because it's us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Manchester is by all of we. Andy Burnham, great new slogan for you. You can use it.
That's free.
That's free for you. We're going to do a sort of more focused episode about what Andy Burnham says he's going to do now that he's in power. But in the second half today, I'm actually going to be talking to Nathan Tankus, repeat guest, an expert on the plumbing of how all the stuff happens and how that has been attacked and politicized. We're going to be going through some of the let's say some of the strange things that are happening in the U.S. at a federal level. But before we get to that, and a little bit on Burnham today, he's made 5 promises. He's made 5, and they're my favorite kind of political promises.
Ooh.
He will. Okay. Number 1, end infighting within the party.
By which way? Does he have really long arms and he's going to separate everybody by just holding them apart?
It's going to be hugs. He's going to separate and he's going to hug.
Okay.
The old hug and separate. Yeah, sure. And I don't know how. It's not like he's going to like get rid of anybody. It seems he's just going to shuffle the cap. Hey, you know what? I would love to see a leader also who would get elected and be like, I won't end infighting within the party. I would never do that. Yeah, it's this is every single British prime minister since like 2012 has promised to end in for 2015 maybe has promised to end infighting within the party. But you think you can do it by force of personality instead of understanding that these are like it's like saying I will convince this train steam whistle to stop whistling without dealing with the underlying head of steam that's been building up.
Maybe they could stop the infighting by beginning outfighting. Yeah. By creating any separation between them and the Tories and Reform on like anything.
Well, look, they could get some inspiration from Trump in that regard and the UFC White House fight, right? Like, so in the Downing Street garden, they could sort of set up a little dojo.
Okay.
It's a lot smaller though, right? Yeah. Like there's not as much land there for them to put the big, the entire device from contact out there.
It sort of have to be like a sumo ring, and there'd be like questions over like whether it's like pads or no pads, gi or no gi.
Also, sumo's foreign, so we need to have a British version of sumo.
That's true. I mean, British sumo is just 2 very pissed guys in the pub who like try to fight each other in the back, and they both miss, and then they start kissing. This actually happened. Did I ever tell you the story about?
Oh my god!
Have I ever told you the story about this?
Every fucking time you say this actually happened, you're about to relate to me and Maddie and the listeners like a situation that you were in that got filtered through the special processes in your brain that meant you reacted to it like I don't think any other living person possibly could have conceived of. So Hussein, tell me, this actually happened to a backroom pub sumo match. Go.
Though there's a lot of talk on the show about Hussein having like being in like Mr. Bean situations. But I submit he's been living a sort of Gulliver's Travels lifestyle.
because I feel like a lot of the time with these stories, I'm more of like the observer. It doesn't really happen to me that much.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Went to an island where horses could talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. One time Hussein was tied to the ground by a bunch of little people, and he just tried to discuss Evangelion with them.
Yeah. Well, I would sort of submit at that point. But what I was going to say was that this sort of happened maybe like a year ago. My wife and I were coming back from like an event in town, and we were walking back home, and there's a pub on our high street, and there were like two guys who were kind of fighting each other, and they were both really pissed. And one of the guys tried to punch the other one. He missed, but because the other guy who was about to get punched was drunk, he like lost his balance and fell on the ground, right? Or we sort of like run across the road to try help him. And the guy, like, as he's sort of waking up, he's just like telling us to fuck off. He's just like, get off me. And we were like, all right, fine. We'll wait here until the ambulance comes. Meanwhile, this guy like gets up and he starts like hugging the one who was trying to punch him. And it turns out they're actually like really good friends. And they just wanted to like, they weren't even really in an argument. They weren't actually angry with each other. They had made a bet. And I'm not sure what the bet was, but it basically was just like, yeah, I bet you couldn't knock me out. And I think it's a really funny situation because actually he couldn't get knocked out, right? Like the punch did not knock him out. It was the fact that this guy had sort of like lost his balance for
this is actually very much like sumo in that there's like a lot of pre and post amble and a lot of ceremony and explaining what's happening and very little actual action.
So basically what we're saying, we're going to have British sumo, which is a traditional sport called I Bet You Can't Knock Me Out. And they're going to do that on the Downing Street Garden to end infighting within the party. Number two. Okay. I think, Maddie, you mentioned we could do outfighting. Yeah. But he's also said he's going to end point scoring. I guess by playing a very defensive game, he's going to park the bus. No one's going to score. Yeah. I guess.
So how are you going to like judge the fights if there are no points?
Well, yes, true.
We just watched probably 6 weeks of like God punishing those who park the bus. And that's his lesson. That's the lesson he takes away.
End point scoring.
And point scoring. No more.
Yeah, so he's going to have his cabinet is going to be arrayed in a 6-person pattern, 2 deep, up against Downing Street, preventing anybody really from getting in. Number 3, set a direction that is distinctively Labour, that's in quotes, by being us, that's also in quotes.
Oh, Manchester by the Wee. Yeah,
that's right.
Ahead of the curve on this. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. Set out a direction that is distinctively Labour by being us.
Yeah. Which Keir Starmer didn't do.
That's okay. Cool. Is there like a aphorism missing here? Because I don't live in Britain.
Yeah, distinctively Labour, because Labour has only ever been one thing. It's never been a whole bunch of different stuff, and each of these things has claimed to be Labour. But he's just, it's going to be vibes. 4, return power to people across the entire UK and also be a pro-business leader. No one has ever been we have had attempted pro-business leaders in the UK, I guess, for the last, God knows, 50 years. But really, other than Thatcher and Blair, no one's succeeded in being a pro-business leader according to everybody's own standards.
Pure capitalism has never been attempted.
Yeah. Or we had pure capitalism for 4 years from 1980 to like 84.
Cool.
And then it started falling apart, I guess.
Return power to the people and be a pro-business leader. Are those things in conflict with each other at all, or what do you think?
Well, business people, he'll return power to business people and other power to other people. Maybe he'll play that song. He'll play Renegade Master for everybody, which I think is a song you maybe could have heard in Manchester at some point. So if you're a bit, I mean, again, all of these things are completely, incoherent, but his promise to bring back good vibes, I guess, to British government without really changing much.
I'm just excited to see a former mayor get a shot on the world stage like this.
Check out Augusta mayors.
Yeah. Well, I just think the premise of that show that we do, it's me and 2 other people. The premise of that show is that the mayoralty is sort of an insanity catch fence. So it's very interesting to see when somebody escapes.
Well, the thing that Andy Burnham was a strange mayor, though, because he was a minister before he was a mayor.
Oh, I see.
Like he bided his time as a mayor saying, I can be, because the whole point of being elected to Britain, a system that's designed for people to hate it and fail them and expose them to the vagaries of global capitalism, right? Like Britain is like uniquely exposed among North Atlantic democracies or liberal democracies, quote unquote, whatever you want. It's like uniquely exposed to like global financial markets. And so everyone hates it. And So the way that you get elected is by saying, I hate Westminster also, and I'm different from them. I do things a little differently here. And that's what Andy Burnham did. He's like, well, I'm going to govern Manchester as a locality. And then what I'm going to become is the mayor of all the localities, which is going to be different from somehow than a prime minister. I guess I'll have to devolve some power. Wait, so, let's just say Andy Burnham is not the guy. So far vindicated. But I'm not here primarily to talk about Andy Burnham. I wanted to make another very fun announcement before we move on, which is I'm ringing the big Charlie Kirk woke fund bell. This was sent to me through the Discord. Thank you, everybody in the Discord, for keeping me updated with the Charlie Kirk fund for woke public servants who did not like him. A Polk City firefighter will receive nearly $200,000 after she was fired for online comments made about the killing of Charlie Kirk. Her name, Alyssa Furry.
No comment.
She is a Polk City firefighter paramedic who made several posts and comments on her private Facebook page, including, I choose not to celebrate, but also not be sad. And today in America, we interrupt the assassination at a college to bring you news of a shooting at a high school. Furry deleted her post and deactivated her account on the same day after once again, a coworker dobbed her in with the fire chief. She was put on leave on September 16th, fired October 24th, and then just last week has been given $200,000.
Sick. I will say about, just real quick, Alyssa Furry, I feel like the suit would melt if you were near a fire. Those things are mostly plastic. This rocks. This is good. Who are these? I don't understand. Why are you dropping the dime on your firefighter coworker for not even, it's like the least offensive imaginable thing you can say, right? Like this is like almost, it's not like, oh, hooray, he died or anything, right?
Well, because it was like the whole Kirk thing.
There was like a week of like fever that we all had that we couldn't say anything. It was very strange.
Yeah, it was everyone, like a lot of people in public offices were terrified that it was like, oh, this is the moment. This is the moment now.
Yeah.
And then reacted as though like fucking stormtroopers were on their way. And it turns out that no, they weren't. What's happening is we're funding every owner of a Coexist bumper sticker car that works in the public sector in the United States of America. It's great.
A glass of wine that you can see from space.
Yeah.
I think there's something like really interesting about this in terms of like how the people who were like pretending that they sort of supported Charlie Kirk, like what they actually thought Charlie Kirk was and what he represented. Because I remember that weird period of time when he was killed. And like in the sort of following days afterwards, like one of the things, and I mentioned this on my other show, 10K Post, but like it's something that I think about a lot, is just like the influencers who try to sort of jump on this bandwagon. And like there's this one guy that I know from like just like media appearances and stuff, like when I used to go on to like radio to do like, you know, little sort of talking head bits. And there was like this influencer guy who used to come on to one of the BBC radio stations that I was on. And his like whole thing up to this point was like he sort of goes to Ibiza and he asks like drunk women sort of inappropriate questions about like their body count and all that stuff, like kind of gross stuff, but like broadly sort of just like things that were sort of there to grab attention. But when Charlie Kirk died, he like pivoted his content to be like really, really political, but in this sort of sense of like Charlie Kirk was there for free speech and like, you know, his message was that like, you know, you should be allowed to talk about anything. And so that's why like I'm going out on the streets of London to ask people what they thought about Charlie Kirk. And like it's quite funny watching the video because he like uploaded all the footage and most of the stuff he got was just people being like, who's Charlie Kirk? Like they don't actually sort of know who he is, or they sort of think that, oh, he's just like this American guy, it's sort of sad he got shot, but like I don't really have any opinions other than that, right? But there were a few people like along those lines who were really trying to sort of like present Charlie Kirk as being this like neutral free speech actor, and we obviously knew that wasn't true, but there was this period where I was just like, oh, like there are enough people who don't know who this guy is that like suddenly there's this opportunity to like reframe him as like the ultimate free speech guy, right? But actually what these people wanted and what they were really sort of gleeful for when he died was like, oh, this is a great way of getting people into trouble, right? Because if you can get people to like say things that are like a little bit disparaging about Charlie Kirk, and obviously there are lots of people who just like don't shut their mouths online and are sort of, you know, just sort of went to town with it. Like we talk a lot about how Charlie Kirk is probably like the most disrespected far right and disrespected person in the world, right? His death has just sort of become like memes upon memes upon memes, like no respect whatsoever. Turning Point as an organization is basically a shell of itself. We're all just waiting for Erica, what's his name? Like Charlie Charlie Kirk. I was going to say Erica Trump, but there's Eric Trump and there's Erica fucking what's her name. We're waiting for
Kirk.
Yeah, Erica Kirk. Yeah. Well, so, my brain's
it's a patronymic.
We're waiting for Erica Kirk and Eric Trump to also be like, we've been impregnated by JD Vance. We're just waiting for that to happen. And so it's sort of like this guy kind of died for nothing, but like his whole purpose, which was just to sort of like own the libs and then get the libs arrested, like just hasn't worked. Like the opposite has happened, which is that like he's getting the libs paid. We're making the big live, laugh, love sign, and they don't know what to do about it. And I think this is also like so interesting in terms of like looking at the state of the right and just like this kind of weird sense where they sort of are aware that like, the curtains are closing and they're not quite sure what happens at this point. And I think it's really interesting just to observe just like the fact that these kind of a guy that they had really hoped would be a sort of like martyr in which they could sort of cast into his own image they have no control over it.
Well, can I give you some other good news in terms of like lib? Let's say the
lib, laugh, love,
the libs, lib, laugh, love, the libs having a field day, which is, I mean, this is us too. This is us and the libs kind of are sort of aligned on this one, which is the Tate brothers getting arrested the same week that Alyssa Fury got paid. So we're going to be following that as well. But there's actually something I wanted to talk about before I switch over to me and Nathan, which unusually I haven't actually done yet. So I can't do my in the future past little
your
thing.
Whole bit is destroyed. I don't know. It's like,
I also know that's only amusing to me, but it's very amusing to me. So I won't stop doing it. So this is another piece of news I want to discuss. Leather jacket worn by NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang sells for just under $1 million at Sotheby's charity auction, CNBC.
What?
Well, on Friday last week, after 65 bids, one of Jensen Huang's pre-worn and signed jackets sold at auction at Sotheby's for $960,000, higher than the pre-sale estimate of $40,000 to $60,000.
Is he dead? My first thought is, did he die? He's alive. Did he die in the jacket?
Is this the jacket that took over Jensen Huang's mind like the Green Goblin? So he wore the jacket in 2023 at an event at Foxconn in Taipei, Taiwan. The original retail price was only $10,000, a lot for a jacket, but not much compared to $960,000. The high price for the garment is a sign that collectors are looking to bid on artifacts and collectibles from the artificial intelligence boom. And I just wanted to say, one of the things that people said after the Great Depression is, hey, when like sort of corporate executives become like, public figures, and like your taxi driver suddenly is like, well, hey, here's what I would invest in, and so on and so on. You might be in a bubble. It's sort of an indicator of bubble territory.
Is it bad when a bubble starts getting lots of sub bubbles? Or I call them subbles.
Subbles.
Like it is just that casino scene in The Big Short, right? Where it's just like we're adding things onto the bubble where it's like, yeah, we're paying $1 million for a jacket now.
So the response to this sale surpassed even our highest expectations. Sotheby's head of modern collectibles, Bram Wachter, said in a statement. Pretty good name.
He said, he added, don't ask about my grandpa.
So Sotheby's said in a statement that proceeds will go to a philanthropic initiative in support of the Edge Institute, which is a nonprofit dedicated to innovation. So you may be thinking, Riley's going to move through a few more news items and on to the interview with Nathan Tankus. Not so. Because do you remember how I said just now, really, I said the Edge Institute?
Yeah.
Did you ask, what the fuck is the Edge Institute?
No, because I know that the Edge Institute is a philanthropic initiative in support of innovation, which I love innovation.
Huge innovation fan.
I'm a huge innovation fan. I'm using a computer right now.
Honestly, if we didn't have innovations, then we wouldn't have anything for Jensen Huang to inflate the value of his jacket. That's pretty obvious to me.
I think so.
This charity auction in support of the Edge Institute, I was like, okay, well, I have to find out what the Edge Institute is. And I can tell you, according to their, what they do is they say Edge City, the Edge Institute, which runs Edge City.
Everyone there is edging.
Everyone there is they're very edgy.
I do not go to Edge City because everyone's about to punch me and come. And I don't know which one each person is.
They're just daring each other to say the word.
Yeah, the common greeting is edgy or edging, and they look at you, and you have to answer the same.
Yeah, if you're different, then you have to fight
or get come done.
That's true. Well, it's like that British sumo wrestling match. So They convene people working at the frontiers of tech science and social innovation in pop-up villages across the globe. And it's actually this will be interesting, it's part of the Zuzaloo ecosystem.
The what? The what?
Thank you so much for asking.
We bought a Zuzaloo?
Zuzaloo. That's the pop-up city movement started by Vitalik Buterin, the guy who came up with Ethereum. Or the guy who, let's say, is widely thought of as the guy who came up with Ethereum. It got started with a gathering in Montenegro, which means, by the way, Vitalik Buterin is now canonically a mayor because he was the mayor of the first Edge City. They say Edge City is a society incubator, an IRL lab of experimentation for new ideas, tech, culture, organizations, all dedicated to accelerating human flourishing. Do you think this is a good charitable organization to donate the proceeds of a ludicrous rich guy purchase of a jacket to?
Oh my God, I know what they've done. I know what they've done. So you know how like Burning Man, for all of its insane faults to begin with, was at some point an art project and then got like overrun with like Silicon Valley types who like just want to like put on like a headdress and run around on drugs in the desert. They've made Burning Man, but it's just business. They've eliminated the art part.
Finally,
it's Burning Man where you can wear just a zip front sweatshirt the whole time.
It's a Burning Man where you don't have to be embarrassed to wear a gilet to it.
Exactly.
So our annual flagship pop-up village in Healdsburg, California is co-organized with the Esmeralda Institute, a new permanent village just 90 minutes north of San Francisco.
They have great wine there, Healdsburg.
This month-long gathering.
Russian Valley.
I know. I'm upset that this is good wine land and they're putting tech idiots on it. They're growing ideas with it, which I think is terrible.
No.
This month-long gathering served as a prototype for our vision, helping us test new ways of living, working, and thriving together. Why create spaces that support this type of experimentation, you may ask? Well, you were about to ask that, right, Maddie? That was going to be your question? Because the systems that shape our time, institutions, norms, governance structures, were made for a prior world. Ones that worked in the past are now rigid and slow-moving, unable to evolve to meet the opportunities and challenges of the current moment.
Mind-numbing sentence. It doesn't mean anything.
By creating these micro exits, you know a micro exit?
I know what a macro exit is. It's when I leave.
Yeah, well, a micro exit is like you can sign out of normal society for like 3 to 4 weeks at a time.
It really is Burning Man. Jesus Christ.
We create space to experiment with new systems, technologies, and practices. What works in these experimental environments can then be shared with broader society, shaping a brighter future for everyone. So Jensen Huang donated his jacket sale. The proceeds from it went to a network state cult thing.
They're finally, okay, cool. This is the first time in human history that someone's built, say, like a city on a hill for everyone to go look at and think about how cool it is and then make society reflect that they see. Yes. There's a good understanding of power and how it works and how it's,
So
great.
This is from one retrospective of an Edge City event. Like they have them all over the world. They have them everywhere. But like the California one's the flagship one.
Okay.
There were movement classes in the morning, lectures and workshops throughout the day, and dinners and parties to the evening. There were no ground rules as far as what programming was allowed, and events covered everything under the sun. There was more standard fare conference talks about people's work, but also sessions on animal telepathy, fertility, regenerative farming, acro yoga, and the aptly named Kids at the Pool. I don't know what that last one is.
Is animal you skipped right over animal telepathy? Is that talking to animals using your mind, or is it animals talking to each other using their minds?
They didn't go into more detail. They just left it at animal telepathy. We're like, well, we assume you know what this is.
We're doing the men who stare at goats again, but this time it's worse and stupider.
This time instead of being funded by the government, it's being funded by the proceeds of the sale of Jensen Huang's jacket. So they say, what gets built at Edge City? I actually looked into this. Only 2 startups have emerged from Edge City, one called Constellation and one called AMI. Both those startups are related to building new AI models, and both of them have been invested in, but neither of them actually have a product released.
Sorry, this little flyer that you posted here. It says new towns, Esmeralda and Galefu Mindfulness City, which sounds like a Zelda location.
Galefu Mindfulness City is a version of this in Bhutan.
Cool. I want to go to Mindfulness City. Become more
where
mindful?
The grass is green and the girls are calm. The other thing about this, by the way, is that the whole thing is funded by a venture capital company called Long Journey Ventures.
And the sale of one jacket.
The sale of one jacket. So basically, again, the charity that the sale of Jensen Huang's jacket funded is something that is also a venture capital investment pipeline thing. So they've paid for a VC's deal sourcing pipeline with a charity auction.
That's cool.
I love it.
It's awesome. I bet that money couldn't be used for something better.
So here's the other thing. Okay, you notice, has the Edging Institute built a permanent city? Well, Esmeralda is supposed to be that. So Edge Esmeralda is a pop-up city that, quote, works with the Esmeralda Institute. So there's the Esmeralda Institute and Edge Esmeralda. The Esmeralda Institute is also a nonprofit trying to prototype a new way of life with a city 90 minutes north of San Francisco like no one else has ever tried to do.
They even read Palo Alto by Malcolm.
There also is something called the Esmeralda Land Company, which is a private land development organization that the Esmeralda Institute does free press for in the guise of philanthropy, owned by a woman named Devin Zoigel, who used to edit Peter Thiel's Stanford Review. So,
we did this already like 100 years ago to take photographs of horses better. Whatever, it's fine.
Zoigel, a 31-year-old software engineer raised in the heart of Silicon Valley, this is from the SF Chronicle, arrived in Cloverdale 2 years ago with fanciful renderings for a village of upward of 600 new apartments and homes in the city's eastern edge. She named the cities Esmeralda, and in Cloverdale's tight-knit town of just under 9,000 people, the idea stoked excitement and alarm. This summer, Cloverdale will begin formally considering Zoigel's Esmeralda development proposal, an idea that has already consumed 2 years of public debate, whether a long-dormant 266-acre former industrial mill site along the Russian River should become an entirely new walkable neighborhood with housing, a hotel, amphitheater, shops and cafes, playgrounds, parks, and trails. This all seems lovely, right? But she owns the company that owns the land. And this isn't even the first company to consider this brownfield parcel for like a rich person retreat. Just a few years ago, it was rezoned for a wine country resort and golf course. It just fell through because they couldn't clean it up well enough.
God, I'm looking at the renderings because I need to see them. And they're just like, in these people's like greatest, wildest dreams and imagination. It just looks like a fucking country club or like a fancy hotel or like the Getty Villa or something.
Yep.
It's just such a lack of, this is the future to you?
Well, you know what Devin Zoigel said?
What?
I don't look like the typical CEO of a development company. I'm proud that I'm different. Doesn't seem to be creating anything different.
No.
So what happened, basically?
She just looks like some lady. All right, whatever.
Is that Jensen Huang sold his jacket for $1 million and donated the proceeds to an organization that is, among other things, primarily concerned with the traveling circus of Silicon Valley people who are promoting, among other things, yet another network state-style land development, whose main concern right now seems to be saying, hey, we can have this thing that Devin Zoigel wants to make, who's also, by the way, connected to the Peter Thiel network. We're going to actually have our traveling Edge Esmeralda thing happen there to promote that it's like a reasonable thing, that it should be rezoned and then it's valuable for developers. So it's basically, it's a real estate value inflation play sponsored in small part by Jensen Huang selling his jacket for charity.
These people truly cannot. All they do is invent stuff that already exists, right?
Yeah.
Like we all make fun of like when they come out and they're like, we've invented sailboats again or whatever, or like we've invented the city bus. But this is just like reinventing robber baron shit over and over and over and over again. It's so, how stupid do they think we are?
Relatively.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? And to be fair, I'm pretty fucking dumb.
So, in case you were wondering, by the way, if anything specific came out of the various Edge cities, this is from their blog. The village was hard to describe because it wasn't any one thing. The activity of the village was, in principle, not something that could have been planned in advance. Each event came to be because someone who was attending the village decided that there was something inside of them that wanted to bring into connection with the community. In aggregate, that meant the whole experience was merely an amalgamation of what happened to be alive for the 1,200 attendees at any given moment.
Living in the moment.
It's just describing people being at the same place.
It's describing a conference. Okay, instead of giving them millions of dollars, I'm making a proposal here.
Jensen Huang, redirect your jacket money to the following.
No, the jacket's already gone. Jensen Huang, sell your shoes or pants or both and give me the money. See, the shoes go for $2 million.
Jensen Huang, sell your used underwear.
Yeah, sell your used underwear, Jensen Huang, and also your shoes could be $1 million each because there's two of them, right? Pants, $2 million each because there's two legs to the pants. So that's $4 million right there. And I will use that seed money to construct the village from the prisoner and send every one of these motherfuckers there for the rest of their lives.
Hey, Maddie, have you been watching The Prisoner?
I've been watching The Prisoner, Riley, and I was texting you about it, and now I'm talking to you about it on the show because I've been watching The Prisoner. You know what's a cool show? The Prisoner. They should give me $4 million to remake The Prisoner. How about that?
Okay, perfect. Jensen, if you're listening, and we know you are.
And we know you are.
We know you are. $4 million for a remake of The Prisoner, or $1 million for sponsoring like a kind of self-directed Montessori summer camp for like billionaires? Which do you think you'd rather want to do? I mean, I know what he'd rather want to do, but one would be cool.
Yeah. As someone who actually went to a Montessori arts summer camp as a child, because it's sort of like where you furloughed your gay child in the year 2001. This is like that, but at least there I was like learning life skills by teaching 11-year-olds how to weld. And here, nothing's happening.
Well, they're making a lot of interesting pre-product startups.
They're making a lot of interesting money.
Well, they also really missed a trick, because if you had Charlie Kirk's jacket, then imagine what you could do with that.
Well, you could clone him probably with the blood from it.
All right. I think with that, it's time for me to talk to Nathan a little bit about the threats to the plumbing of the world, which is pretty
future.
That's right. Hello, everybody from the first half. It is Riley in the second half, joined for, I think, the third or fourth time, Nathan Tankus from Notes on the Crises. Nathan, fresh off your Odd Lots appearance, how was it doing the second best show in our genre?
It was fantastic. They've got a fancy new studio where you can document the craziest hand gestures that you've ever seen three Jewish guys make. You can have quite a fun time with that video. You can see my tattoo fully visible on it. So I'm talking about all these technical things, and I've got this crazy tattoo you can't quite read, but it's crazy. It was a great time.
And also, of course, thank you for coming back on. If you're not familiar with Nathan's work, he writes a great deal about the mechanisms through which the Trump administration has attempted to take control of certain elements of the United States federal government that are really supposed to be a million miles away from politics. Things like if the federal government grants a state money to do something and the money shows up in their account, the Trump administration is trying to take over the mechanism that allows the money to stay in the account, therefore undermining the concept of what makes money money. And we've spoken about this a few times, and it's worth almost having a retrospective on that, what you call the Trump-Musk payments crisis of 2025, and the long tail of touching the money, basically. Trump and Musk touched the money a lot. A bunch of things could have happened that didn't. A bunch of things did happen, and a number of other things have now been, say, fatally undermined. I mean, I think the perfect example of this whole sort of Doge effort that encompasses things outside maybe what those literal guys were doing is the current Cyclospora lettuce parasite outbreak, because Doge cut a team that was monitoring this particular parasite from 11 to 3 people on the basis that there wasn't a Cyclospora outbreak going on right at that moment, and therefore it wasn't in the media and buzzy and headliney and so on. But what they did was undermine like the future resilience of certain things that you might want, and even if you're a capitalist might want. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is the things that are not as obvious as like Cyclospora funding or like general medical research funding, but like stuff like the very underpinnings of the economic plumbing of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think, for me, a comparison that I made from the very beginning of the Trump-Musk payments crisis, which we'll get into, I think really is the thing that you should keep in your mind first and foremost, because the model for everything is that Elon Musk bought Twitter and he eviscerated a whole bunch of teams. He knocked down a whole bunch of the infrastructure that they had and then went, great, things didn't immediately collapse. Ergo, we didn't need any of that stuff. And the thing about Twitter is you knock down the resilience of Twitter. You make Twitter gradually worse in all these ways. Inveterate posters like you and me suffer, but ultimately it's not the most important thing in the world. But a guy like Musk learning a lesson like that, all these, white hats, telling me all this infrastructure that we need and how important it was and blah, blah, blah. Well, they were all wrong. I could unplug shit and it'd be fine, is essentially his mental model for everything. And when you knock down when you take that same approach that he took to Twitter to, say, the federal government of the United States, and you knock down all this redundancy and resiliency in the system because of things that aren't happening right now, and your proof that it was fine is that things didn't immediately collapse, then you're going to see recurring things like this happen, where we're all having diarrhea now, or all this other stuff, and stuff that's less, sexy isn't the right word for diarrhea, but less in your face, let's say, is diarrhea that is happening, 1,000-fold over all these different elements of the federal government, and then things that were funded by the federal government. And we see it play out, and we're going to continue seeing it play out. I mean, we're going to be having Doge-related outbreaks or crises, or, something's going to break that's going to cause a lot of damage, like 10, 15 years out, and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is another Doge thing that we didn't quite catch, even as we were trying to reconstruct the federal government or whatever. I was talking to some people recently, and it's like, in a lot of ways, a Democratic administration that rolled back 40% of the damage of Doge in their first term would be a wild success. Like, that would be really impressive to be able to work back 40% of the damage. And there are just a million things like this, and it won't be predictable what breaks next or exactly when it breaks. But we do know that a bunch of stuff is going to break over the next 10, 15 years because, teams went from 8 to 3 guys. There was one guy on it, and he's the only person who knew why it was important. So he couldn't justify why his job was important. He was fired. And then 3 years later, every building that's above 100 stories collapses or something. And it was like, oh yeah, he produced the tungsten alloy that went into the steel beams or whatever, just whatever it is. It'll sound like the most nothing thing in the world, and it'll be very important.
Whenever we speak about this thing, because we've spoken about it a few times, we tend to speak in terms of possibilities, contingencies, risks, things that should have a non-zero chance of happening, suddenly gaining non-zero chances of happening. The last time we spoke, I think we talked about how close the world came to a generalized financial crisis during the impoundments crisis, where suddenly the U.S. government appeared to politicize the question of which bills it would pay because the actual mechanisms, the plumbing, if you like, is the frequent metaphor used, had become politicized. And it was looking as though the federal government may start making choices about, say, which treasuries it will pay the interest coupons on, thereby destroying the global financial system. Because again, the person who is directing most of that, Elon Musk, thinks, well, I can try it, and if it destroys the global financial system, I'll just reset it and it'll be fine. But doesn't understand that the thing he's breaking, just like with Cyclospora cutting that team, the thing you're breaking isn't just, oh, I caused an immediate financial crisis and then fixed it by restoring it. My bad, everybody. It's that these things are social. They're about belief. They're about, say, if you buy a treasury bill, you never have to worry about the coupon being paid, right? And suddenly, if you have to worry about the coupon being paid, that changes a social fact. And so that's more abstract than they cut the team monitoring for the parasite and now everyone's pooping. But it is incredibly damaging that this was even considered, right? This is something that should have a zero possibility that was given a non-zero possibility during the Trump-Musk payments crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I think even bigger than that, which I think we also spent a lot of time talking about, is just these people being idiots who don't know what they're doing. Like the bigger possibility, the biggest danger was simply that you had some 20-somethings who downloaded DeepSeek and were rejiggering COBOL code based on DeepSeek and didn't barely understand the concepts of business logic, certainly don't understand the decades of business logic that have accrued in these systems, and breaking something that they didn't know how to fix, and them breaking things enough that payments simply stop being processed by the federal government. And if payments stop being processed by the federal government, wholesale, all payments would stop being processed, it's, not just the federal government, it would be a global social implosion within a matter of weeks. Because you just think of all the payments that went off. Suddenly, no one's getting Social Security. Suddenly, no state and local governments are getting payments. no treasury pay, as you pointed out, the treasury bonds, treasury securities, which in a lot of ways would be the easiest to quote unquote fix because the Fed can step in. But like all these other payments where you can't locate who you need to pay and you have to engineer a system on the fly, it's insanity. It's just total insanity. And they really did risk doing something like that would have, and even if you do something where you can fix it in a month, like what happens in American society when no payments are coming out of the federal government for a month?
Or what happens if no one is 100% confident that the payment will come?
Yeah.
Even after.
What's funny about that is it seems like the answer is kind of nothing right now. We can talk about this more later, but like the ability for what I've been calling, the conventional wisdom processor or like conventional wisdom to hold. For decades, we were told like any little thing would spook global financial markets and like have everyone running for the exits. And if anything has disproven that, it's this where like, Trump could go on television, do the Reagan bit of like, there's going to be a nuclear war in 5 minutes, but like be serious. And like the financial markets, there'd be like a little sell off. It'd be like, the stock market's down like 1% on the word that Trump plans to announce a nuclear war tonight. But like, Trump always chickens out. Like he's not gonna go for it. So it's fine.
This is something you've written. I'm officially declaring the Trump-Musk payments crisis over. For now, it appears we are settling in for a long, drawn-out, and still ongoing impoundment crisis, along with a constitutional crisis over executive authority. But that notwithstanding, the extent to which the Trump administration has backed away from abusing the payment system is because they think both impoundment and targeting enemies can be accomplished with more familiar tools that are less dangerous to wield. What the Trump-Musk payments crisis has illustrated is that our payment system is incredibly fragile and subject to enormous abuses, which is true, as we say. The markets did not bring about the worst. Significant damage was done, and high latency damage that we won't be identifying for years. And that damage will also be very geographically dispersed. Like, for example, Doge cut a program that was researching how fast shrimp could run on like underwater treadmills. And Elon highlighted that. He was like, this is stupid. This is like a woke waste of money, jobs programs for scientists, whatever. And it's like, well, no, that's super important to shrimp farming. And so if the United States is suddenly unable to produce as many shrimp domestically, then shrimp prices around the world would probably go up, right? So that one thing could have high latency, geographically dispersed damage that's difficult to trace back to it, right? And so it's like this fragility and these abuses are so widespread and so subtle that they are very insidious and it's always, the important thing is to always trace it back if you can to this. But say a little more though about like this phase of the crisis being over, this crazy phase, and a more insidious phase beginning.
Yeah. So, you can imagine I break this stuff on Doge and the Treasury. And then I have this follow-up piece about like them just taking money directly out of New York City's bank account. And like, or is there any controls that are stopped from the federal government just capriciously taking funds out of people's bank accounts for like any reason they can come up with? And the answer basically being no. This has been like the most hard-coded norm ever. It's just like, well, like, it's like people would get on the internet and tell lies. Like someone would get in the government and just start like randomly taking money out of people's bank accounts. It was just the norm.
Yeah, it's like, hey, they all promised to not do that.
Well, I mean,
they all said they
didn't even promise not to do that. It was just like, oh, obviously it would be crazy to do that. So no one would do that. It was just the norm to defeat all norms. It's like, okay, Trump is going to break every other norm, but surely he's not going to break this norm. It was a norm that was so hard-coded that it didn't occur to anyone. It like literally did not occur to anyone. It was a norm that hard-coded.
It's like how you don't smell oxygen.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't think about how I need oxygen. It's just there. And of course, that's the kind of thing I think about. And checking around, and it's like, nope. There's a national association, trade association that deals with the automated clearinghouse policy, but the federal government has long had an override where it gets to override the association's rules, and everyone's just been like, well, they'll probably be fine with that power. You know, what could go wrong? And here we are. And so between those two things, it's very hard to get rid of the idea that this stuff is just going to keep on popping up everywhere. And I searched and I searched and I searched, and we just couldn't come up with more classic payments crisis type stuff. But we could come up with impoundment, various examples of impoundment. Because my first piece wasn't actually about the Bureau of Fiscal Service. It was about OMB. And I was and before the Trump administration started, I knew OMB and Russell Vought was going to be a big thing to look to. And I wrote a big piece about him just issuing this guidance, which froze payments. This was the main mechanism. This is the mechanism that the Trump administration intended to use to shape the federal government in the United States to its will, was just straight up impoundment, not messing with the payment system. And as I looked at this more, what I came to, what fully clicked in my head was this has been just like an embarrassing rigmarole all around. Because if you look at the world through Russell Vaught's eyes, you know, he's happy that like Musk sent Doge kids into different agencies and got people fired and, you know, got control of the real estate and the email addresses and all that stuff. But ultimately, at the core issue of impoundment, not just like bending individual administrative agencies to the Trump administration's will, but like the core issue of impoundment, Vought must look at this stuff and go, you fucking idiot, because he's already got what Musk wanted. What Musk didn't understand is that when Musk looked and said, oh my God, the Bureau of Fiscal Service processes all the payments, they just process a payment automatically. What about anti-fraud? What about this? What about that? And like got himself in a tizzy. The whole system has checks for that. They're often agency-based checks, but more than that, OMB has oversight. So if OMB doesn't want a certain type of money to be spent, OMB can reach into these administrative agencies and deal with that. He doesn't, like, essentially on the fly, high on ketamine, Elon Musk tried to get his 20-somethings to jury-rig build a very complicated apparatus to control payments that Vought already had.
Yeah, it's like he didn't need to touch the money. The important thing is don't touch the money. But he was too stupid and he touched it.
He was just reaching into the like copper wiring of the federal government, pulling it out. And Vought is like, no, I've already built all of these apparatuses to do all this stuff. In fact, it was a bipartisan project to build this for 50 years, and I've just taken control of it and bent it to my will and reshaped it to doing what I want rather than the good governance shit that they claimed this system was built for. And so he must, at a certain level, look to like, why are you freaking everyone out? Because, you know, in no small part because of my role, but other people too, people started randomly showing up and screaming at these people going, what the fuck are you doing? Like, they're telling us that you're going to blow everything up. And of course, I'm sure everyone involved was like, who are this fucking guy? Who are these people? That's all bullshit. But nevertheless, like, none of them wanted to deal with this. Like, this was a crisis that broke out in like the first 2 weeks. Like, we started banging the alarm about this like the January 31st. Like,
that's a really quick crisis. That's a really quick TTC, time to crisis.
Susie Wiles did not want to have phone calls about the most boring part of the Treasury.
Now, I want to talk about what Russell Vought actually is controlling and the way he's changing it to sort of try to shape the machinery of the federal government more towards, let's say, his hyper-authoritarian ends. Because he's doing this as head of the OMB, Office of the Management of Budget. And he's doing it in a way that's not scary or headline grabbing, because that was the problem. What Musk and his, teens were doing was touching the money. It was frightening. It was also something weirdly that was kind of understandable, because at the same time as they were doing it to like payments to New York City, they were also doing it to stuff like scientific research, things that are easy to picture. They're doing it to the CDC. You can picture yourself shitting. Now, a lot of people have to. But Russell Vought is doing it in a way that is not as overt, but is, you could say, about as damaging, at least in terms of his agenda being damaging.
The big picture is, as I was staring at this, what clicked in my head, and the specific reason that I say that OMB already had built what Musk was trying to build, if he even had a coherent concept in his head, is that agencies don't just like, oh, Congress passes a legislation, an appropriation for an agency comes, and then suddenly the agency has a whole bunch of money. There's a recent piece with a couple of research fellows who've been working with me on this, doing a great job, Juan Haynes and Josh Lawrence. I wrote about how you can kind of think of like Congress passing a law and the appropriations, meaning just like money that's been quote unquote appropriated for X or Y activity, as a kind of congressional check. But the congressional check, is no longer say like Treasury gets the money and hands it out to different agencies in their bank accounts. Instead, what happens is for the last number of decades, like a kind of middleman has been inserted in processing congressional appropriation. And this middleman is the Office of Management and Budget. So nowadays, what happens when Congress passes a law, the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, interprets that law, and it creates different appropriation accounts, is what they call it, for different line items, different types of funding for different agencies. And the crucial element of this is that the fact that they create these appropriation accounts, they also get to define over the period that they're spent. So there's something called apportionment. So they don't have to release the money that an agency is granted for a full year all at once. They can divide it up. And in fact, they can divide it up as thinly as they want. They usually do every 3 months, but they could do per month. They could even do every single day. Just we're releasing you little drabs of money to spend every day. And you can imagine if someone can decide that you're only getting a certain amount of your money available each day, they have a lot more control over you than if you're just like processing the check and you just get all the money. But it's even more than that. The OMB is able to attach what are called footnotes. So they're able to just create conditions notionally within the powers that have been granted them, but nevertheless to create conditions on how this money is spent in various different ways. And, I started looking at this and thinking, okay, these appropriation accounts, they're essentially money. They're just a kind of internal money of the federal government. Whenever money needs to be sent to an external actor, to some contractor or whatever, the Bureau of Fiscal Service processes the payment goes out. So this money is not something that anyone outside of the federal government ever interacts with.
Wait, are you saying the American government has Walt Disney bucks?
I mean, essentially, the American government have OMB bucks, and they have to spend out of their OMB account, and the Bureau of Fiscal Service will turn OMB bucks into, US dollars, money in bank accounts, so on. The money that we think of as money. They've got this internal OMB bucks. Maybe they should put bought space on it. But yeah, they've got just like an internal little money that is just for, asserting a middleman between Congress and spending money out there. And notionally, it was to make these systems, quote unquote, more efficient, reduce redundancies, but also, yes, for the presidency to be able to express its policy priorities by influencing what and how the money is spent that Congress is already appropriating.
So then maybe this is where that rule comes in, which is, what are the conditions that we can put on these accounts? Because we can attach rules to the spending of Disney bucks, essentially. And what Russell Vought appears to be doing, this is that 2 CFR 200, is changing the way that, Disney bucks are allowed to be spent by creating a huge amount of expensive and arbitrary additional bureaucracy. But I think more importantly, quite nakedly political review of what money is being used for. I'm going to do a quote from Notes on the Crises, and this is from Phil Rocco, one of your co-authors. This is the sort of thing that has attracted attention for its potential to politicize scientific research, but the scope is far broader than that. Its application to state and local governments does nothing short of using intergovernmental aid to create a new patronage system. Agencies, which the rule deprives of substantial discretion in adjudicating grant compliance, can now terminate awards that do not align with the president's priorities. Most disturbingly, discretionary grants to state and local governments must now go through pre-issuance review. which means that political appointees will scrutinize proposals to ensure not that they are consistent with the statutes Congress has passed, but that they align with the prerogatives of the president. The rule arms agencies with new, vague, and easily politicized criteria to apply. These include ambiguous rules about a recipient's past, quote, questionable practices, as well as risk factors not defined. Discretionary awards cannot be used, for example, to fund, promote, encourage, subsidize, or facilitate, among other things, any other initiatives that compromise public safety or promote anti-American values. And that's just left up to any, say, political appointee to determine, right? There is other political additions as well. There's a reputational harm proviso. There are points there on viewpoint discrimination, but also it franchises this out. Agencies can coordinate with private individuals or organizations to bring private actions against grant recipients anyone might deem to be too un-American. Is that approximately the shape of it?
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge proposed rule. Comments closed last week. There was like about 50,000 comments ultimately submitted. So like you can imagine how big a deal something has to be for 50,000 comments to be submitted on an OMB proposed rule. It's pretty amazing. And it's precisely because of this is that we're talking about, the federal government makes nearly $1 trillion of grants a year. And that is an enormous amount of money that goes to all sorts of things, from science, from state and local governments. And to be able to, traditionally, the traditional concept, and of course, it's never been ideal like this, but nevertheless, was that civil servants were processing these grants, were making the decisions around them, that there was professional criteria that went into these grants. And, a little bit of a good go along to get along thing with state and local grants where like, well, we don't want our priorities to get screwed over so much. So we're going to, go light on your priorities and just sort of treat it as like, state and local governments, red or blue. And what this is a process of just purely trying to override that system. Vought in essence wants to have direct control over what gets grants. So that means nothing LGBTQ, nothing woke, quote unquote, nothing gender ideology, nothing Marxism, nothing Green New Deal. All of that will be, will be cut. These are the terms that are literally were used in the first executive orders that the Trump administration listed. And, they mean anything remotely that could be put under any of those categories. And they want full control. And not just do they want full control for what, but they also want essentially to give a private right of action to let like the craziest far right fascist organizations in the country to be able to sue grantees if they come across a grant that they think is violating these rules, that like is too woke or is too just like, let's say basic competency oriented. So it's not just that like Walt wants direct control, but he also wants to let the looniest, far right nonprofits to also be able to exercise control and oversight over who gets what funds. And so, yeah, I mean, you can imagine if you can directly control who gets $1 trillion in funds and they have to do your bidding to get it, then we're talking about an enormous system of coercion for both private actors, state and local governments, et cetera. Like you can imagine, for example, in like the most extreme cases, hey, if you state and local government aren't going to implement our views of election rules, and also, hey, maybe wink, wink, declare that, this person didn't win the presidency when they did, then, you're getting all your funds cut off. Or this person didn't win the midterms when they did, they get their funds cut off. That kind of direct control can get anything. All of that is possible if, this OMB proposed rule goes through and isn't tilted to courts or rolled back by Congress. Like this is all stuff that is possible. And, it kind of follows through from the unitary executive state, the idea that the president is supposed to have direct control over anything that goes on in the executive branch. Yeah,
well, they seem to be trying to create not just an empire abroad, but an imperial system at home as well, right? Like, even in like the late Roman sense, where the Senate becomes a consultative body, but largely what the emperor wants happens.
If Congress doesn't have the power of the purse, if Congress has the suggestion of the purse, then we are fully in an internal and external imperial system with direct presidential. And that is, we're talking about nothing less when we're talking about this stuff.
Yeah. And just like when we were talking about like undermining things like payment finality, what we were talking about was an attempt to impart that control somewhere that touched off huge alarms when they attempted to extend into that area, partly because it was new, partly because they were doing other things, and so on and so on. This is an attempt to extend that domestic imperial power to do almost the same thing, just without setting off really quite so many easily comprehensible alarms. That's partly because the political immune system, if you like, sort of the things like outrage media cycles, elections, and so on, versus courts and agencies, right? Like the difference between something having a huge amount of political salience and the institutions that are able to then do something about it. That the institutions designed to like notice these kinds of problems are different from the ones that are designed to act on them, and that's what's. And those were temporarily brought into alignment by the craziness of the Trump-Musk payments crisis of 2025. But the Russell-Vought imperial presidency crisis of right now, even though, there are 50,000 comments on this proposed rule change, it's not on the front page of every paper like the sort of dismantling of the state under Doge was. It's still the realm of, let's say, interested parties and podcasters.
Yeah.
Like me.
And I to really highlight this, a big part of this is how decimated our media system is, that there's not really room for built-in expertise. I mean, this is kind of, in a way, very similar to the Doge, like we're going to fire 8 people and get down to 3 people, a 3-people thing with, when now we're all shitting ourselves. It's, this kind of happened first with the media, media getting cut to the bone, various profitability issues, getting bought out by private equity and such. Like, so there's no room for having like, in the 1960s, you could open a dusty room and there'd be like smoke filled everywhere and papers everywhere. And you'd go, "Hey, John," and it's like, what do you want? And it would be a guy who's kind of lost his mind a little bit being on his own, but he knows everything there is to know about a specific thing. And you had that guy around for when it was important. And you take him out of the smoke-filled room and he would be like the font of knowledge you needed for the biggest story on earth, but it requires that expert. That stuff is done. Like we're way past that era. And so what it means is, to the extent that there have been OMB stories, it has been basically from sources from talking to Congress, like basically a combination of like whistleblowers or talking to Congress. And the stories are fairly superficial, even if they get like the details of their specific story right, because no one has expertise on OMB. No one in Congress has expertise on OMB. I've talked to congressional staffers who tell me, oh yeah, when there's something OMB related, they have some former official at the OMB, and he gives the OMB talk, which is clearing up basic misconceptions about OMB. But there's no like staff that has like a congressional staff that has like a guy or 3 guys who knows everything there is to know about the OMB. I've talked to Senate budget staffers who are like, yeah, I don't really know about OMB. And it's like, okay, I mean, as a result, like Congress people literally don't know. Like I got this one quote from this Reagan OMB guy that's basically like, oh, it's like a knife in the back. I could totally destroy this congressperson's priority and they won't even know anything that happened. I could collect $4 billion more in taxes and no one would know where the revenue came from. Like just through like little things in the guts. The more you look at OMB, the more you're just like, it's so important. And he exercises so much control. Like there's one of the stories we dug up from an oral history was this guy who retired as a high up in the State Department started at OMB. And when he started at OMB in 1975, it was like his first job out of college and taking the 4th service exam. And he was put in charge of the entire line item, Naval Research and Development, which was a $4 billion line item at the time. And he would, treated as a VIP, like given all these like flyover missions and like, see the latest naval boats and all this stuff and see all their like development facilities. And he's some 25-year-old. And I did the math, $4 billion line item is 1.31% of Ford's proposed presidential budget for fiscal year 1975. So like one 25-year-old has control over more than 1% of the federal government's budget just by virtue of their seat as a program examiner for OMB. And like they wield enormous power. And that was when you wielded enormous power when it was like roughly within the constitutional framework we had.
Yeah, that was before Russell Vought decided to sort of do what he's now doing with it. And now it's going to be, we're taking that 25-year-old and we're just like showing him, I don't know, he's saying, hey, we freed Andrew Tate and he's going to do a flyover for
exactly.
you.
No, it's going to be a 25-year-old who posts Pepe memes and is like, well, what if we just didn't spend any money on boats that could go in cold water? I don't want us sending boats so near Russia.
Maybe cold water is soy. Yeah, maybe cold water is soy now. And I think that the Navy shouldn't be gay and soy. I think the Navy should be like jacked and based. And now my good friend Russell has given me the legal basis to say no more cold water boats. Going in cold water is gay, officially, according to the OMB. And so no more of that. Thank you.
One other good thing to illustrate of how important this stuff is that like, this is like the technical stuff around this is actually what the first Trump impeachment was about. You know, the very famously, like, Trump has a call with Zelensky where he's like, you know, basically investigate Hunter Biden, or more or less, you're not getting the money. But the technical way that was done was that Vought, who was also head of OMB in the first term, but kind of getting sea legs, learning how it all worked, just decided to start attaching footnotes to the specific line item, the appropriation account that was associated with giving Ukraine money for weapons and training. And just like, after, you know, we're not going to release this money until like an interagency committee is able to review this. And the date for that was like 16 days later. And then 16 days later, he just releases a new footnote attached saying the same thing. And they just kept on doing that until like mid to late September, where by the time it reached that point, there just wasn't enough time to spend like the money in that account. And so $214 million expired. And of course, Congress reauthorized, they reappropriated the funds. But that was the technical form of denying Ukraine money that the whole impeachment process was about. Now, of course, one way you look at this and goes, oh my God, this is so tiny, nothing compared to everything that has come later. But it's also interesting, like when you want to do something like that and screw with somebody and you want to try to hide it as much as possible, what you do is you do something very technical and boring with the OMB.
Well, I think that is as good a place as any to leave it for today, because that thought, the technical and boring is where they get you, is, I think, true and has been true for a very long time. Nathan, it is always a pleasure to speak to you. Where can people find a little more of you?
Well, I can find it in my publication Notes on the Crises, CRISESNOTES.com. And if you add a -- future there, you can find a 50% off discount code on a subscription for Trash Future listeners.
That's right. Or people who are trying random combinations of letters on their keyboards and happen to get really lucky in a very specific way.
I think some people Google it and find it too. Yeah. Like, I don't like these Trash Future guys, but I like free money.
So I'll make it look good. Anyway, Nathan, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And I'm just going to hand back to myself in the future past and Maddie and Hussein just to say goodbye from there. See you in a second. And what an interview it was. Maddie, Hussein, I'm sorry that I muted you both and talked over you as well.
Yeah. It's okay. I was trying to get Jensen Huang's phone number.
Yeah, it's okay. I was actually looking at a replica jacket because I want to pull up one of these schemes myself. So
yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of TF. We're going to be back as usual with the bonus on Thursday, and we will see you in a few short days. Maddie, what do you got? What do you want these people to do?
What do you got? I plugged my podcast earlier. Go buy my book, please. Simplicitybook.xyz, or in any fine place where books are sold. Yeah. And hopefully in the next 6 months, you can pre-order the next thing, but keep buying the old book because it needs to be bought. And that's what I'll say about it.
Maddie needs to buy all of Jensen Huang's
Honestly,
wardrobe.
it is on theme because it is about utopian separatism, but in a way that is interesting, not the way the Jensen Huang's jacket is doing it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.